All right. Hey, Anatomy 1 students, welcome to our first lab video. This video is on lab number 1, which is appropriately on page number 1 of your lab manual. It is entitled Body Terminology, or Terminology of the Body, rather. One of the things we're going to do in anatomy class, is describe and examine the structure of the human body. Okay, in a lot of situations, anatomy is going to equal the study of structure. So when we're studying structure, when we're doing that, we have got to be on the same plane. I got to be able to talk to you, you got to be able to talk to me, and we have to know what we're talking about. We need to be in unison. And to achieve that, one of the things we have is this thing called anatomical position. In fact, this lady right here is standing in anatomical position. She's standing up. She's got her palms facing forward. Her feet are flat on the floor. Most of her joints are at a 180-degree angle. The only exception being the ankle joint down here. Now, why do we have this position? It's a frame of reference. Okay, it is a frame of reference so that you and I don't have to explain ourselves. We just automatically are going to assume that when we're talking about the body, we're talking about the body in anatomical position. Okay, anatomical position, that is step 1. Step 2 is to notice that in this picture here, we have a lot of directional terms, things like lateral, medial, proximal, distal, etc. We are going to go through those. Those terms let us be specific about the human body and where exactly things are. All right, let's look at that same picture again. And we're going to start with some of these directional terms. Directional term number 1 is anterior. Anterior means towards the front. So think about where your face is, where your chest is, where your abdomen is, where your kneecaps are, where your toes are pointing. That is your anterior direction. Now, there's another word that's similar to anterior. That word is ventral. Ventral means towards the belly side. So in humans, like you and me, anterior and ventral are synonyms. Now, if we have a front side, we have a back side as well. The back side is known as the posterior surface. It is also called the dorsal surface. If you've ever seen a shark swimming in the ocean, you would recognize that shark because it's got that big dorsal fin. Dorsal means on the back. I promise that's the last shark I'm going to try and draw this semester. Okay, so anterior ventral, front side, posterior dorsal, back side. And we have these synonyms here because you and me are bipeds. We walk on 1, 2 feet. Bi, of course, means 2. Ped means feet. Think like pedestrian, pedicure, that sort of thing. Now, we do have to establish a difference. Not all animals are going to be bipeds. Some animals are going to be quadrupeds. They're going to be 4-footed. So like this eastern quoll down here, he is a quadruped. And so in him, this directional terminology is a little bit different. The anterior surface is where the direction his snout is facing. His tail is back here on the posterior surface, kind of the butt side for him. But then his belly side is down here. That's ventral, and his dorsal side is up here. So In a quadruped, anterior and ventral are not synonyms. Posterior and dorsal are not synonyms. Now you might wonder, why am I telling you this? Why am I showing you a quadruped here and talking about this? Well, when we do anatomy and physiology, we often use quadrupeds for things like dissection. So we'll dissect sheep parts. In the past, we've dissected pig parts, cat parts, monkey parts. Not doing any monkey parts now, but we've done it in the past. And so, because we do other animals, and some of them are quadrupeds, this matters. Okay, let's do some more of these directional terms. When we are comparing two structures, we often want to relate one to another. Okay? The one that's closer to the top of the head is the superior one. The one farther from the top of the head is the inferior one. So, for example, if we look at President Obama here, his chin is what to his mouth? Well, the chin is farther from the top of the head, so the chin is, hopefully you just said it, the chin is inferior to the mouth. Now, let's do another one. The mouth is blank to the eyes. Well, there's the mouth right there, and there's the eye right there. And so the mouth is also inferior to the eyes. Now, if we switch the position, like if we take chin and mouth and switch their position, well, then the mouth would be superior to the chin. The eyes would be superior to the mouth. Now, one thing you got to realize, it is absolutely incorrect to say a sentence like this. To say, hey, the mouth is superior. Why do you think that is? Well, the answer is, you always got to say superior to something, inferior to something. Okay, cool. Let's do some more. Let's do some more and some more. There we go. Now, another way we can compare two structures is not just up and down, but side to side. Now, what I want you to do is imagine a human being real quick. Let's draw a human person. Bear with me for a second. Drawing a human person. Dun, 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 dun. I guess I did not need to give them a belt, did I? Give them a nice head. There we go. It's hard to draw hands, so we'll just draw a pair of hooks. Okay, so I got this nice human person. I want you to imagine a line running right more or less down there. It's not perfectly straight. That line is called the midline. Now, when you compare two structures, the one closer to the midline is medial to the other one. The one farther from the midline is lateral to the other one. All right, let's do one here, okay? If we look at this picture here, here is the breastbone, the sternum, which sits right in your chest, so you can find your sternum. And right here is the costal cartilage. Now, the costal cartilage, well, it is more to the outside. It is more to the outside than the sternum. So the costal cartilage would be lateral to the sternum. Now, let's do another one. Let's compare the sternum, so there's our sternum again, to our collarbone, which is the clavicle. Well, the sternum is more to the inside. So, if the sternum is more to the inside, the sternum is medial to the clavicle. Now, bear in mind, we would never just say the scapula is medial, so a sentence like that. We would never say anything is medial and just stop. It always has to be medial or lateral to something. All right, so we did anterior And posterior, we did dorsal and ventral, superior, inferior. We've now done medial and lateral. Let's go ahead and do some more. Okay, this one is special about a limb. All right, you have 4 limbs, right? Hope, probably. Not everybody has 4 limbs, I guess. But probably have 4 limbs. You, of course, have 2 arms, and you have 2 legs. So you have 4 limbs total. If you are in a limb, you are going to use a pair of words called proximal and distal. You're going to use those when you are in a limb, okay? Now, you're going to use the word proximal if something is closer to the trunk, like closer to the hip. Or if we were doing an arm, something that is closer to the shoulder. I was trying to draw a little person right there. There we go. If something's closer to the hip or closer to the shoulder, we say it is proximal. If something is farther from the hip, farther from the shoulder, we say it is distal. All right, let's try some right here. Okay. The tarsals, and the tarsals, by the way, are these ankle bones down here, are blank to the patella. Well, the tarsals are farther from the trunk, farther from the hip up here. So because the tarsals are farther, the tarsals are distal to the patella. All right, let's do another one. The femur, so here is the femur right here, this thigh bone, is blank to the fibula. Fibula is one of your leg bones. It's the outer leg bone right there. The lateral leg bone, in fact. The femur, well, the femur is definitely, you can see it's closer to the hip. So the femur is going to be proximal to the fibula. Okay, by the way, you're never going to say a sentence like the tibia is distal. It's always going to be distal to something. Okay, cool. Almost done these directional terms here. Almost done with them. There we go. Another pair of terms we use are superficial and deep. So if something is closer to the surface of the body, it is superficial to the other thing. The thing that's farther from the surface is going to be deep to the other thing. So, for example, we are looking at some skin here. This is the surface right here. You can see the hair coming out of the skin. That is the surface. Now, if I look at my skin here, the skin has a layer called the epidermis and a layer called the dermis. Look at the positions of those two relative to the surface. So, the epidermis is blank to the dermis. Hopefully you said superficial. Superficial. Now, don't mix up superficial and superior, okay? All right, let's do another one. The dermis is blank to the subcutaneous tissue, the fat down here. The dermis is, well, look, it's close to the surface too. It is superficial. Awesome. We'll just write super F right there. Now, of course, you would never say a statement like the muscles are deep. You would also always say deep to what? To something. Okay. Excuse me. Fantastic. Fantastic. Just about done our directional terms. You know what? In fact, we are done our directional terms. Awesome. So we did anatomical position. We did directional terms. And now we're going to talk about slicing. The word anatomy, by the way, literally means to cut apart. The ana part means apart, and the tomi part means cut. So anatomy literally, and and practically involves cutting things. When we cut things, we got to talk about the types of slices we make, because I may show you a brain cut in half, and you got to know what kind of slice it is to understand what we're looking at. So, best way to start is with a tube, or a tube-shaped organ. Tube-shaped organ, think artery, vein, intestine, esophagus, trachea, ureter, urethra, fallopian tube, and etc., etc., etc. Now, when we're cutting a tube, we can make a cut across the tube on the short axis. That is called a transverse cut. By the way, trans means across. So transverse cut is across the short axis. We can also make a cut on the long axis. That long axis is right there, and going down that way, there's a longitudinal cut. Now, because, well, I want you to notice the word section here. Slices are often called sections. And because when we look at a tube, once you cut it as a longitudinal section, you can't really describe that any further, but we're about to meet a pair of terms that are going to apply to the human body. All right. Let's clear that real quick. There we go. Okay. In a human body, we've got the transverse cut. You can see the transverse cut going across her right here. Transverse cut separating a top and a bottom. Okay? But now in a human body, unlike a tube, we have a front and a back and a left and a right. So we can make different longitudinal cuts. And we can see two different longitudinal cuts here. There is a sagittal cut. There is also a frontal cut. The sagittal cut and the frontal cut are both longitudinal, but they're just oriented perpendicular to one another. Okay? The sagittal cut is going to cut you in such a way to give you a left and a right piece. The frontal cut cuts you in such a way to give you a front and a back piece. Okay? All right. So if we were to have a human being, there's a human being right there. Just draw a human shirt. Just going to draw a human shirt to represent a human being. All right? Human blouse there. If we made a cut like this, straight down like that, what kind of cut would that be? Well, if you shouted out sagittal, you are correct. What if we made a cut like this? That kind of cut would be transverse. Awesome. Awesome. All right, let's get rid of all this mess here. We got 3 basic cuts, 3 basic sections or planes. Notice that we like using multiple words to achieve the same goal. Couple more things here. One thing I want to point out to you is that this sagittal cut that we're looking at in this picture right here, this sagittal cut, you could also call it mid-sagittal because it is going right down the middle. It's giving you a left and a right, so that makes it sagittal. It's mid-sagittal because it's going right down the middle. Okay, one last thing. Imagine you were doing some jumping jacks. You would be moving your arms in the frontal plane. So here's you. There's you right there. Arms are at your sides. Feet are together, more or less. And then when you do a jumping jack, your arms are coming out and your feet are coming out as well. And your legs and arms are moving in the frontal plane. Okay, awesome. One last thing. I keep saying that, don't I? One last thing. The word frontal has a synonym, when the synonym for that is coronal. All right. Let's keep on going. Hey, check this out. This green line on this guy is showing us a longitudinal section because we're going along the long axis. When we make this cut, this green line cut here, we're getting a left and a right half. We're getting a left half and we're getting a right half. They're not halves because, well, they're obviously different sizes, but a left chunk and a right chunk. And here's the thing. That makes it a sagittal cut. But this one is not a mid-sagittal cut. Remember, a mid-sagittal went right down the middle. If there's a sagittal cut, but it doesn't go down the midline, it's parallel to it, it's going to be parasagittal. Now, there are lots of parasagittal cuts, obviously, but there's only one mid-sagittal cut that you could have. Okay, with that, we are just about done. All right, here is a mid-sagittal section of the brain. We're going to learn these brain sections, these brain parts, rather, later on in the semester. But I wanted to point out what a sliced open brain would look like. This, whoops, I went the wrong way there. My bad. There we go. There we go. There we go. This is a mid-sagittal section of the skull. So we cut open the skull. Looks like this. We'll learn just about all of these things later on. Don't worry. All right. Let's look at another organ sliced open. This is a transverse slice of a skull. So think about that. Think about cutting your skull across. This is a frontal section of the heart. We can actually see chambers on the right and chambers on the left. So we haven't separated left and right, but we have separated front and back, and that makes it frontal or coronal. If we look at another one, this is a slice of the trachea and the esophagus. And notice that when we slice the trachea and the esophagus, because they're tubes, we're going to get ring-ish shaped sections when we slice them transversely, that is. You can probably feel your trachea in your neck. If you go towards the bottom of your neck, you can touch your trachea. You feel its rough cartilage in there. Trachea is just anterior to the esophagus. Esophagus just posterior to the trachea. All right, great news. Done this video on lab number 1. And you're going to read through lab number 1. You're going to do the activities in there. It does ask you to use a piece of styrofoam at one point, but you can use any three-dimensional thing that you can cut, like an apple would work. Anything like that would work. Email me if you have any questions. So email me if you have any questions about this. Come to my office hours and let me know. And lab number 1, the video for lab number 1 at least, is done. I'll see you guys later.